You ever wondered what happened to Jackie Kennedy's blood-stained suit after the assassination of JFK? After shots were fired, blood from JFK's injuries seeped into her pink outfit. Following the incident, Jackie refused to take off the suit on the way to the hospital and even when she was transported to Washington. Jackie continued to wear the suit even when Vice President Lyndon Johnson was sworn into office. And this was broadcasted nationally so everyone could see. Jackie stated that she kept the suit on because she wanted the assassin to see what he had done, and that her only regret was wiping her face clean of blood before going on camera. It wasn't until the next morning that she took off the suit. Today, her suit, shoes, stockings, and even handbag remain preserved in the National Archives. And they will remain hidden for nearly a century. In 2003, these items were officially donated by the Kennedy's daughter, Caroline. And at that time, she requested that these items remain hidden for 100 years. Meaning that the suit won't be on display until the year 2103.
So let's talk about the real-life monster that inspired Silence of the Lambs' Buffalo Bill. And that is the case of Gary Heidnik. So Gary Heidnik was a man who between 1986 and 1987 kidnapped and held 6 women captive in a hole he dug in his basement. 2 of the women ended up passing away due to the terrible conditions he kept them in, and so he ground up their bodies and then fed them to his dogs. Now, Gary was finally caught when one of the women he had captive managed to convince him to let her go to a nearby gas station so she could call and say goodbye to her family, and he agreed. So of course she called the police and he was quickly arrested. Now, during his trial, his whole defense rested on Gary's claims that all the women were already in his basement when he moved in. Of course, nobody believed that, and so Gary was found guilty and executed in 1999.
John Jones was a husband and a recent father who decided to go cave exploring in the Nutty Putty Cave in Utah. While exploring with some friends, they decided to challenge themselves by passing through a narrow passageway that leads to a larger room, which was called the birth canal. John squeezed through the opening and made his way forward, only to realize that there was no larger opening. The group had missed the birth canal and were now crawling through a passageway that didn't lead to anywhere. John couldn't move forward anymore and he could no longer turn back on his own. He was stuck upside down with his hands pinned under him with only his feet sticking out. Search and rescue came and set up a pulley system because drilling him out was too slow and too painful. But the pulley system could only work if they broke John's legs. After 27 hours stuck inside the cave upside down, John had died of positional asphyxiation. It was too dangerous and difficult to retrieve John's body from the cave, so authorities closed off that section. To this day, John remains wedged inside of the Nutty Putty Cave.
Right before the Columbine massacre began, did you know that one of the shooters actually let somebody that he had threatened before in the past live? The student that Eric Harris allowed to survive was a guy by the name of Brooks Brown. You can see him right here in a school photo with Eric Harris standing right behind him. Eric and Brooks were friends before the massacre, but in the past, Eric had actually threatened Brooks on his website. You see, Eric had this website where he would rant about life, write really dark things, and provide instructions on how to create chaos. And at one point on his website, Eric actually threatened to kill Brooks, and Brooks' father reported it to the police, but the police never looked into it. The morning of the shooting, only moments before the violence began, Brooks ran into Eric outside of the school, and Eric told Brooks to go home, thus saving his life. Brooks is alive and well today, and he speaks frequently about the massacre. If you want to hear the full story of Columbine and play-by-play of that day and some reasoning behind why it happened, go listen to my podcast, Murder in America. I co-host it with my fiance. This is our latest episode. The link is in my bio. You can listen on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And thank you.
The height of the rampage of the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, when his break-ins of homes, rapes, and murders was terrorizing all of Southern California, an alert 13-year-old boy in Mission Viejo, James Romero, changed the course of this story.
There's no question that James provided us with the most important piece of information out of over 2,000 phone calls.
But I'd kind of rather not comment on that.
I guess I'll ask you what you wouldn't answer me 25 years ago. Give me the details. The night he met face-to-face with the Night Stalker.
It was an instinct, and I just went and I saw somebody at our house, and I just went chasing after him. Blue jeans, black members only jacket, a baseball cap.
And the license plate?
482 RTF.
He didn't know anything about the Night Stalker terror. He was just a 13-year-old boy up late in his garage hearing a noise. Someone was trying to break into his parents' bedroom. He took a look, saw a stranger, and that stranger, Ramirez, took off running.
Do you think he saw you?
Yeah, I know he was aware.
Why did he come after you?
You know, I'm not too sure.
I feel like kids can see ghosts that we can't see. This story is about an imaginary friend that was probably something way worse. And if you like spooky stuff, definitely check out my podcast. A woman in Virginia claimed that when her daughter was little, she used to have an imaginary friend that she called Little Michael. And at first it was all the normal imaginary friend stuff that kids do. She would ask if little Michael could eat dinner with them. She would ask if little Michael could tuck her in at night. But she also said that if little Michael didn't do those things, that he would get mad, which the mom thought was kind of weird. But then one day the daughter is drawing, so the mom comes over to see what the daughter's working on. And she had drawn a stick figure of herself holding hands with a ghostly child figure that was in tattered clothes. This isn't the exact photo, but the child apparently had these deep, large black eyes and was holding wilting flowers in the other hand. So the mom's a little worried and she's like, "Hey, what are you drawing?" And the daughter's like, "Oh, it's little Michael." The mom said the daughter demanded that that photo be put on the fridge, and after the drawing was placed on the fridge, little Michael just kind of stopped showing up as much. The mom chalks it up to a little kid's imagination, but also says that anytime there's any sound in the house, that's all she can think of.
Because of this case, I absolutely fear getting onto public transit. In 2008, Vince Lee beheaded 22-year-old Timothy McLean on a Greyhound bus in Manitoba, Canada. This all happened on July 30th of that year when Vince sat next to Tim on the bus from Winnipeg to Edmonton when Vince pulled out a knife and began repeatedly stabbing Tim. The bus driver and passengers ran out of the bus, called police, and watched as Vince decapitated, mutilated, and cannibalized Tim. When the police arrived, it took 5 hours to negotiate with Vince, and they eventually arrested him when he tried to escape from the bus. The crazy part about this case is that Vince was not held responsible for Tim's murder. He was first charged with second-degree murder, but he pleaded not guilty because he suffered from schizophrenia. Vince said that he heard voices in his head that told him that Tim was evil and he should be executed. The judge ordered Vince to be sent to a psychiatric facility and he was released in 2017. He now lives in Manitoba and has changed his name to Will Lee Baker. And the public was pretty upset about this because they feared that if he decided to stop taking his meds one day, will he attack again?
Young girl named Emily discovers an old dusty doll in her attic, and what happens next is just plain scary. The doll had a strange aura about it, and Emily felt as though it was watching her every move. She decided to keep it and named it Robert. At first, Emily loved Robert dearly. She would dress him up in different outfits and play with him every day. But as time went on, strange things began to happen. Emily would wake up in the middle of the night to Robert sitting at the foot of her bed, his glassy eyes staring at her. Sometimes she would hear him whispering to her in a language that she couldn't understand. Well, Emily's parents were skeptical of her claims, but they couldn't deny the strange occurrences happening in their home. They began to notice that objects would move on their own and they would hear footsteps when no one was around. They soon realized that Robert was the cause of all of this chaos. And one day, Emily's parents decided to get rid of the doll. They put him in a box and drove him to a local thrift store. But when they returned home, they found Robert sitting on their front porch waiting for them. They tried to get rid of him again, but he always seemed to find his way back. Well, over time, Robert became infamous in Key West. People would come from all over just to catch a glimpse of the haunted doll.
I've stolen over $300 million, making me the world's biggest cyber criminal. My name is Ramon Abbas, but you might know me better as Hush Puppy. My oversized ego brought about my own downfall, and I was sentenced to 11 years in prison. During a search of my home, the police discovered a staggering $40 million in cash. I was born in Lagos, Nigeria, and my childhood wasn't easy because of a lack of money. I started my career as a cyber criminal by engaging in small-scale financial frauds and scams. I later gained experience using sophisticated techniques to steal personal information, impersonate people, and illegally access online bank accounts. I chose to display my wealth on social networks, showing off luxury cars, designer clothes, and luxury hotel stays. I nurtured an image of a high roller who lived above the law. Unfortunately, the 3 million followers and my lavish lifestyle I displayed on my Instagram account attracted the attention of the media and the FBI. A lengthy investigation in June 2020, I was arrested in Dubai by Emirati authorities in collaboration with the FBI. I was charged with various offenses, including money laundering, wire fraud, and criminal conspiracy. My arrest attracted public attention and highlighted the dangers of cybercrime and the view of new technologies. On November 8, 2002, I was sentenced to 11 years in prison in the United States. My story illustrates the disastrous consequences of engaging in online criminal activity. I started out as a small-time internet hustler and became a cybercrime giant. Time flies and every action has consequences. Think before you act.
How young is the world's youngest serial killer? 20? 18? Even 15? This age reveal at the end of the story will shock you. Amarjit Sadeh killed 3 people in separate incidences between 2006 and 2007, including 2 family members. This story takes place in India, and we're going to start in 2007 with a missing baby. A young woman had left her 6-month-old baby in the care of a primary school, and when she had come back, the baby was missing. Now, of course, immediately this baby's family was frantic, and they all began pointing fingers at one individual, Amarjit Sadeh. They're quoted as having said they knew he had a dark streak and he was not like the other boys his age. Villagers called the police and said, "You need to speak to this boy." And the police initially dismissed them, saying, "There's no way a boy that young is going to know anything about that missing baby." Ultimately, the police listened to the villagers and tried to speak with Sadeh, and his parents were hesitant to let him speak to the police. And the disturbing fact is, the reason the parents were hesitant to let their son speak to the police was because they already knew that the boy had killed his cousin and his baby sister. They didn't bother getting the police involved with that, even knowing what their son had done, because it was a family matter. But eventually, after pressure from the police, Sadeh's parents did let him speak to the police. And it was at this point that Amarjit Sadeh admitted to the police what he had done. While in police custody, Amarjit was very cool, very collected, even asked for a biscuit at one point before telling the police that he had in fact snuck into the daycare where the baby was sleeping, took the baby out of the crib and out into the woods where he brutally beat her with a brick and strangled her. He also admitted to having killed his 8-month-old baby sister in the same fashion, as well as his 6-year-old cousin. The father of this 6-year-old cousin was one of the family members who kept Sadeh's crimes under wraps. Family loyalty was obviously a big deal in the Sadeh family. But again, with the outcry for this baby infant to be found, they could no longer keep a lid on this, and the monster that this boy was came to light. And the shocking truth is, this boy was only 7 years old. This young boy was a certifiable psychopath. He smiled all through his police interrogation, had zero remorse for what he had done, and had taken a chilling delight in the pain that he caused these children before he ultimately killed them. India does not allow children to be sentenced to death or to even be jailed, and so he was put into a children's home until he turned 18. Sadeh was released, and to this day, he is unaccounted for and on the loose.
A small town called Kurum in the Czech Republic, a man named Edward is setting up a baby monitor for his newborn son. However, as he's tuning the device, it picks up a strange signal. Edward glances at the screen, and to his horror, he sees a child. But it's not his kid. It's a young boy, completely nude with his hands tied behind his back, and he appears to be eating off the floor of a concrete room. Let's rewind 2 years to 2005. Klara Morova is a single mom raising her 2 sons with the occasional help of her older sister, Katerina. The boys have a pretty happy life, going on adventures and spending their time not in school at summer camps or playing sports. It's at around this time that Clara and Katarina are introduced to a 13-year-old named Annika. She's an orphan girl originally from Norway and has an absolutely traumatic past. Previously, she was taken by a sex trafficking gang back home and is currently on the run, suffering from many rare medical conditions. Clara then begins to develop a relationship with the girl and starts treating her as though she's her own daughter. Her sister Katarina also wants to help out, so she does her part by taking Annika to the hospital whenever she needs to go see her doctor. The doctor shows her a diplomatic passport and all of Annika's medical records, so Clara gives him her number and trusts him as if he's any other medical professional. She then begins receiving text messages with special instructions on how to care for Annika. Oh, sorry guys, one tiny detail that I left out. Annika is actually a 31-year-old woman named Barbara Skorlova. And old Barbara is a bit of an actress. She'd actually gone to a school of dramatic arts, gotten liposuction and a breast reduction to make herself look like a teenage girl. Over the next year, the boys, Jacob and Andre, start spending more and more time with their grandparents, while Clara begins the adoption process for Annika. However, Annika makes it very clear that she is not comfortable being a part of the family because the boys are mean and abusive toward her. Clara, completely thrown off and distraught by this, starts messaging the doctor asking for help, and he tells her that the only way she can fix the boys' evil nature is with tough love and punishment. Clara starts by beating them, then eventually starts locking the brothers in small rooms every time they do something wrong, until summer 2006, the doctor recommends the only way to truly cure the boys is with shock therapy. Clara and her two sons travel to a little yellow college where they're met by Katarina, the doctor, and two other adults. And as it turns out, the doctor is actually Barbara's brother, who goes by the name Jan Skrylova. Over the next several months, Clara, her sister Katarina, Annika's brother, and two other adults keep the boys in dog cages and severely abuse them. They force them to live in their own excrement, not allowing them to talk to anyone, not even each other. Annika continues to convince Clara that the boys just won't stop abusing her, so the real abuse gets even worse. And while all this is going on, she's living the life. Annika gets her own room with all the toys in the world. Meanwhile, Jacob and Andre are kept in a small concrete room, standing in their own urine. Clara even goes as far as connecting a baby monitor to her TV so she can watch the boys in misery at all times. And that's when a signal gets disrupted and a neighbor sees little Andre on his baby monitor. In May 2007, Clara and Katarina are arrested and the three children are put in a home called Cloakneck, but Annika, or should I say Barbara, disappears without a trace. 4 months later, she's discovered across the continent in Norway, impersonating yet another teenager. However, this time she's disguised as a 13-year-old boy named Adam and has completely shaven off all of her hair. When she's captured, investigators start to put the pieces of the case together and discover Barbara's father, Joseph Skrylova, is the leader of a cult called the Ants. Since her birth, Barbara's father Joseph has used her as sort of a messiah, or a child sent by God, to grow his cult and gain more influence. Apparently, Jacob and Andre had been chosen to be her bodyguards, and the gruesome experiences they suffered were an attempt to make them desensitized to pain. More recent investigations into the case theorize that the cult was actually a cover-up for child exploitation, and the boys were being broadcasted on the dark web in exchange for money. Despite this, there are no sexual crimes mentioned when the case is taken to trial, and Clara's sentenced to 9 years in prison. Her sister, Katarina, gets 10 years, Barbara's brother gets 7, and the two other adults get 7 as well. Barbara, on the other hand, actually gets a 5-year sentence and is even released 2 years early. On a brighter note, today, Jacob and Andre appear to be overcoming adversity, living happy, healthy lives. And they forgive everyone involved in the case and are actively rekindling a relationship with their mother.